Welcome to Too Weird to Live, Too Rare to Die, a show exploring the lives of founders, investors, and operators trying to turn the world we live in into a better place. That's the first time I've actually not read that. That's the first time I've gone through the memory, and as you can see, it was a little clunky. So we've got Michael Batko, BatkoOS, here today to join us. Mate, welcome. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Cool. So before we actually dive in, we have a ritual here at Too Weird to Live, Too Rare to Die, and I'm going to throw it over to Walo, who's going to welcome you in with a little surprise. So here we go, over to you, Walo.
Yeah, hey Mike. So have you been sung to before? Have you been serenaded before any podcast before?
No, I haven't.
Get ready.
So well, you're about to, get one. And I learned you like anime, so I kind of made an anime-ish intro. Because I also like anime,
Oh no.
But I can't speak Japanese, so it's in English. Yeah, and it has a really cool beat. So yeah, let's get to it. Okay.
Set of eyes to see the light, to see the world, to see the people. Yeah. He's got lovely brown hair, but nobody cares except for me. Except for me. He's Michael Batko, let's go. Michael Batko, let's go. He's Michael Batko, let's go. Michael Batko, and he loves anime. Set of eyes to see the light, to see the world, to see the people. Yeah. He's got lovely brown hair, but nobody cares except for me. Except for me, he's Michael Batko, let's go. Michael Batko, let's go. Michael Batko, let's go. Michael Batko, and he loves anime. Michael Batko. Yeah.
Wow. That did sound like an anime starter, I have to say, like Attack on Titan or something. Well done.
Yeah. I do my best.
Bro, that was so animated. That was actually classic. Oh my god.
Well done. I've definitely never had that happen to me before.
You probably never will again, I'd say too. It's pretty weird. Great job, Walo. Exceptional as per usual.
Yeah, so, thanks. I hope the connection wasn't shaky.
No, it was good. So, so Batko. So, mate, really excited to have the show. You're a bit of a hero around the Melbourne and Australian startup scene landscape. It's kind of there's a real Be Like Batko kind of vibe going on. So I'm sure there'll be some nuggets of gold in here, and excited. But before we jump in, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about who is Michael Batko, background, how did you get to where we are today, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So I probably need to start with that I like anime.
We know that, mate. We know that. We got that clear.
That's on a personal note. I do like stories and long character development. So my accent is German. So I'm half Austrian, half Polish. And I grew up in Austria. I studied in the UK. I kind of started my career in finance, then swapped into consulting, and then moved to Australia roughly around 7 years ago. And I actually started working for one startup back then, which was MadPause, which is marketplace pet sitters. So you go on a holiday and you don't have anywhere to put your dog or cat, and you can find somebody on there. Matt was actually recently just IPO'd. Then I joined another startup called Expert360, which was a marketplace for independent consultants. And like with my background of marketplaces and consulting, it was actually a perfect fit. And we scaled the company to like from 10 to like 60, 70 people. We raised the Series A and the Series B. And then it was kind of like the big decision for me of what did I want to keep doing. Like my role became more narrow, and I am the kind of person who loves to work on a billion different things. So I left. I went on a trip around the world to kind of find myself and decide what I really wanted to do. And the conclusion was like a kind of reoccurring theme in my life, which is scaling myself. And instead of like helping one startup, how can I help 40 or 50 startups a year? Which is when I joined Startmate, which is, I can tell you much more about Startmate, but we call ourselves the epicenter of startup ambition.
Yeah. And you very much are. Definitely keen to talk about Startmate. It's been super exciting to see it all grow. You know, it seems to be you close your eyes and there's a new product that suits a new need, and it's all great stuff. So I want to dive straight into the startup landscape. So you've obviously been involved in what I would say must be now 3 really successful startups. Obviously Mad Paws, Expert360, and now Startmate. And with Startmate, you see dozens, tens, hundreds of startups come through. Talk to me about what does it take to build a great startup? What are the trends that you've seen through your experience, Mad Paws, Expert360, and through the success stories that you have seen and will see and are seeing at Startmate? What does it take to build a great startup?
Well, okay, so that's a long conversation, but if I was going to start with one thing, I would say absolute customer obsession. It's a founder who works on their life's mission, something that they will literally never let go until it is solved. And it's almost irrational to a certain extent. It is obsessive to a certain extent. But that's the kind of founder who will just not stop at anything. The startup journey is one of the most difficult journeys you can go through. It's a roller coaster of emotions. Things work out, they don't work out. You go through the biggest highs and the lowest lows. And only a founder who really truly cares about the customer and solving that problem, they go on to succeed. As you said, like I've worked with so many different startups before, and you can actually see that quite quickly when you work with people of like how passionate they are about that, about whoever they are serving.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So in your time at we talked to Phoebe Gardner recently. Did she was she alumni at Startmate?
Yeah, that's right. Bardi.
Yeah. So that was a fascinating chat, and you could tell kind of just speaking with her how passionate she was. It kind of just oozes through the way she talks about what she does, and like just such an exciting space. Tell us about what are some examples? What are some of the startups and some of the founders that have come through the program that you're just like super excited to see the future of, and what was the problem that they were solving?
Yeah, I mean, let's actually start with Buddy. That's a very exciting one. Where if your listeners listen back to the episode with Phoebe, who could even talk so passionately about maggots and flies and making pet food out of them and fertilizer and what an incredible space, and what a person it takes to actually just to care about it so deeply, right? So absolutely, Phoebe and Buddy is a startup which I'm incredibly excited about. And maybe just to give you a second one of what it takes to be a successful startup is it is a business model which just makes a lot of sense and is kind of easy to understand as well. So with Buddy, the really interesting thing with Buddy is actually that they are literally making money in 3 different ways. And they accept waste and make money to take other people's crap. They manufacture that, and the primary product is actually protein and pet food. But even the stuff which doesn't work out, they can sell as fertilizer, right? So it's just this beautiful, complete like circular economy, which which in itself is like in a way undefeatable, which is really, really cool. So yeah, super exciting. And Phoebe and Alex, the founders, are absolutely incredible and just so deep into that space. Maybe another startup which I can cover would be that impressed me back when they went through the Melbourne 19 cohort, so over 2 years ago, was Swoop Aero. So Swoop Aero is they essentially deliver life-saving medication via drones in remote areas. So if you think about, for example, a country like Vanuatu, we've got hundreds of islands and it's really hard to access healthcare. What they actually do is enable that with drones which fly themselves with the medication straight to the right place. And those guys are, I mean, they went for Startmate with 2-3 people and now are a team of, I think they're between 50 to 100 people now.
Wow.
In 5 different countries around the world. With literally like government contracts, like the hardest customer in the world in a way, get a government on board to buy anything. And they are actually now selling in 5 governments and flying medication to 2 million people around the world, which is absolutely incredible. So that's another like mission which resonates. Founders who I have gone through highs and lows, but the interesting thing as well, maybe that's the third thing which I can mention of what it takes to make us a successful startup, is a founder with a mission, like the vision and the mission, obviously, because it's so inspiring, actually attracts awesome people to work for you as well. And the bigger of an advocate you are of that mission, for example, to save lives through medication that flies itself to remote areas, the easier it is for you to actually attract awesome people to work for you.
Yeah, I totally agree. And Phoebe was awesome. I was talking to a buddy of mine who's really in the sustainability space. He worked at Future Super. And where's he working now? Forget where he's working now. But really kind of deep into that space. I was doing a couple of laps of Albert Park on my push bike the other day, and with an earphone in, and I was discussing with him. And we were talking about the fact that, you know, I think it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive to really be trying to look after the planet. You know, building sustainable startups and, you know, having a great commercially minded business model. Phoebe's the perfect example, you know, like the most sustainable business model you could ever imagine, and gets paid in 3 different ways, you know. And I'm keen to hear, because I know that you at Startmate had a climate cohort. I obviously with, you know, the IPCC report recently, you know, the day after that report, I saw Chris Sacca, announcing an $800 million fund to basically throw money at startups that are probably all going to fail to try and build the technology that we actually don't, the technology that we need, that we don't have, that we have to be working on. But can you, like, how did that go, the climate cohort? And are you seeing you're seeing exciting stuff in the space around sustainability, impact, and so forth? I mean,
Yeah, totally. So that back then when we advertised, it was actually our first climate cohort. So that climate cohort actually still keeps going. So roughly a quarter of all of our startups now are in the climate change space. And we kind of define it as carbon de-acceleration or decarbonization, really. So that can be done in lots and lots of different ways. So we've had startups go for Startmate, which made brewery waste and extract the hydrogen from the waste to then power the brewery back up. So like a circular economy kind of thing. We've had startups in lots and lots of different spaces, and tackle that kind of problem. And to your question of how are those going, and maybe a really good example would be 5B. 5B is in the solar space. And what they did when they went for Startmate was in 2020. And they essentially started with rolling out solar farms really fast. So what they have is a unique kind of solar installation where instead of, or like the hardest problem with solar is, or not the hardest problem, one of the problems is that you actually, if you want a solar farm, you need to go through like 10, 20 different providers. Somebody needs to actually give you the gear, somebody needs to install it, somebody needs to plug it in, you need to put it back up to the grid, etc. And even the process itself is super hard. So what 5B does is actually they come in and very quickly and all by themselves essentially roll out a solar farm which is ready to go. And those guys back then went for Startmate. And now are again like a team of, I think, 100 people and global, and they are just raising a round of $50 million.
Wow.
Phenomenal. And actually rolling the solar farms out all around the world, which is pretty impressive. So it's almost like, oh, sorry, you go.
No, I was just going to say, with the climate cohort, how much of the opportunities, because I know it's like the idea of an accelerator is like preparing people for, potentially, venture capital, and like you need to have a fair bit of, you need to be commercially pretty exciting for that to be the process. But is there anyone that's going through like the climate cohort that is like, we want to support this technology that isn't that commercially viable? Do you know what I mean? To like B2B, B2C, like to build the technologies that governments may need to implement, or like I don't really know. I don't really know how to phrase this question. If you know what I mean.
Yeah, totally. So let me address it slightly differently than actually this question, because I think it's a bit of a preconception that just because somebody works on climate change and preventing global warming, that they actually can't have a business model that's sustainable, and that you need to pour in lots and lots of money into something before it actually works. In a way, that kind of change actually has to be supported by an awesome business model, or a strategy, or a community strategy that just has the potential to scale and make a massive impact. Without the underlying kind of business model, that thing is always bound to fail. So I guess to answer your question, no, we haven't backed companies which we don't believe can be commercially viable, because it's almost like they can only be successful if they're commercially viable. That's the only true way of scaling.
For sure. No, it makes sense. It's I guess the reason I was mentioning it, I remember I read How to Avoid a Climate Disaster by Bill Gates, a recent book, and there was two takeaways. His big two takeaways that I took from the book was the things we need to do is like plant trees. He's really big on obviously carbon sequestering by just tree planting in the right areas and so on and so forth. Obviously the easiest way and most common carbon offsetting. And also he said that even if we do everything right from today, we need to invent our way out of it, like Mark Watney in the Martian, we need to invent our way out of this problem, and the solutions don't exist yet, even if we do everything perfectly. That was kind of like, if I remember it rightly, that's kind of what I took from it. So yeah, I mean, when you think of that, when you think of like people tinkering away on like, I guess, solutions to solve the problem, I'm kind of thinking, I know there's so many great business models out there that you see, like obviously like Barty. Barty's the best, great example that we just used. But yeah, I was just kind of thinking about like the mad scientists sitting in the lab trying to figure out like this, that, and the other. But I think that if you go back to the old adage of you get paid in relation to the size of the problem that you solve, then it's always going to be some level of commercial viability, considering you're focusing on the world's largest problem. So it makes sense.
So in that space, it's or where I think you're going with this is, do we need to pour in lots and lots of money to get that innovation ahead so it's actually commercially viable? And that's definitely true in some spaces. If you think, for example, about alternative meats, is actually the perfect example, where right now it is still expensive to produce a fake beef patty kind of thing, but it's already going down so quickly because, like you said, the size of the opportunity is absolutely massive. So even though people will have to put in lots and lots of money into that space, so they know that they actually can get that money back as well sooner or later when that is actually commercially viable. And so maybe in the interim, though, what you actually are trying to solve a little bit is actually change of consumer behavior and getting people slowly onto that. So maybe another great example is a Startmate mentor called Michael Fox, who is creating, who has the company called Fable, which is essentially, mushrooms, which taste like meat kind of thing. Or you can essentially have, I think they're already at grilled now as well. You can have a mushroom patty burger, which actually tastes like any other burger kind of thing.
Beyond Meat, that's my order from Grilled every time. The Beyond Meat, Beyond Garden Goodness, I get it every time. And I actually also hit up that Michael Fox guy on LinkedIn a couple of days ago to come on the pod. I like the story of Fable. To be honest, that technology that you just mentioned, On my previous podcast, which was just like kind of more of a general show, not really business related, just interesting and important stories was kind of the vibe and the tagline. We interviewed Thomas King, CEO of Food Frontiers. This was like 3 years ago now. And yeah, his whole thing was like, he was kind of, I don't really know how his business model works, but he wasn't on the technical side, engineering the cultured meat and so forth. And he wasn't on the delivery side, like selling the meat. He was like he seemed like the PR in between, making it all come together. And when he when he went really deep on cultured meat, for me, as soon as I heard it, I was like, this is the greatest technology that we'll see in our lifetime. And I'll tell you why I believe that. And you've probably got a few things up your sleeve that you could fill me in on that'd blow my mind. I'm not in your space. But if you think of the fact that, one, the emissions from methane, from cows farting, obviously, is, killing the world. Secondarily is the amount of land taken up by animal agriculture. And third, animal cruelty. Like in 100 years, you know how people sit and look back on like slavery, and we all say, oh my God, how could people live through that? I think that'll be, and I'm not a vegan or a vegetarian, so I'm part of the problem. I think in 100 years' time, people will probably look back on us and say, how could they live through that? So if you think of like those three problems that cultured meat is solving, it's just the most incredible. I can't wait. It's going to be, it's a crazy, but it is changing consumer behavior and getting it at scale that it's like, it's you can buy it at a rate that's not $100 for a burger kind of thing.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's kind of like two things in here for me. Like one is the why now, and the second one is technical risk. And like you said, the why now is so strong. There's just a couple of things in the world and in this time and age coming together where the pull to have the technology is just so strong, which then gives rise to lots of those types of businesses and then fuels that innovation. And the second one is actually maybe a slightly different topic, which is also back to our previous conversation around technical risk. We know all of those things are possible, right? Mm-hmm. And now it's literally just a matter of time and money to make it affordable and in every single person's hand, right? Mm-hmm. So it literally is inevitable, apart from time and money. So we know it's coming. And it doesn't matter how big the technical challenge is, we know it is actually possible and it will actually happen sooner or later.
So good. I want to move to leadership and pick your brain around that. So I'm a founder and CEO. I'm always reading books about leadership. I'm fascinated by it to the point of maybe nearly obsessed with it. Go through periods, I would say. And I mean it when I say it, like I mentioned at the start of the show, there's this, it's nearly like a hashtag that people just go by, and it's be like Batko. I went through your Puddle Pod and I'm getting more and more kind of more connections in the Startmate and Blackbird community and Melbourne-based startups. And you have this crazy reputation for being a great leader, super productive, like just, you have a great reputation in that space. And what you've been able to do at Startmate shows that, obviously execution has been amazing and things are really exciting. So I want to talk to you about, what does being a great leader, CEO, doesn't have to be CEO, but like what does being a great leader look like to you, and how do you how do you bring that out in yourself?
Yeah, right. Big question. Hard to find the starting point here, but I think if I had to summarize it for myself, at least or maybe even just the way I describe Startmate to everybody working at Startmate it is a platform for ambition. And that doesn't just go for startups and all of the different founders and operators and investors who go for Startmate, because they're definitely exactly the platform for their ambition, but I actually genuinely mean it like it's a platform for ambition for my team as well. Mm-hmm. And this is actually the exciting part of What you want to do is give people a reason why they should be doing things and inspire them on like, those are the awesome things we can change in the world. And then what you want to believe in, if you did hire a great team, is that they know how to do the how better than you could in the first place. So you give them the why, but they actually figure out the how. And you actually, or that's my leadership style anyway. I give very, very high autonomy to everybody at Startmate, and they know that they can literally do everything and anything and need hardly any approval. That definitely has pros and cons. Like the pro is that everybody feels actually inspired and fully bought into the mission and vision and can just make things happen on an hour's notice, on a day's notice. It also has the side effect though, where people almost get too involved and too emotionally involved in it, and they give their lives to Startmate, which is then one where you always need to balance that from a well-being perspective as well.
Interesting. Can you dive a little bit more into that? Because obviously, you know, it sounds like a major positive, but I feel like you're talking about maybe some sort of burnout. Like what? Yeah. Can you dive a little bit more into that?
Yeah, totally. Where do I start? Maybe I'll start with what we do at Startmate as well, which is part of our culture. And it is so much around culture and the kind of culture you're building. And as I just mentioned, we're building a culture of very high autonomy. But the other thing that we do is to actually measure that culture is we do a quarterly culture and survey for engagement and well-being. And that is incredibly helpful. And we absolutely love that. But one of the, and we get very tangible feedback of what's good and what's not working in Startmate, and we continuously strive to improve that as well. But to your question of maybe some of the symptoms which happen, I mean, if you think about yourself, if you were so passionate about something that you literally won't stop thinking about it, and you day and night have those thoughts in your head, and you literally like dream about it, that is, on the one side, it's awesome because you're like fully bought into it. On the other side, you literally just don't even get a break because that's all you do and all you think about. So it is exactly around creating those boundaries around work isn't everything, and take time for yourself. And we actually call it like work-life boundaries essentially, rather than work-life balance. It is very much around creating those boundaries for yourself and for your family and for your own well-being.
Yeah. That's really great. I actually saw, I think it was some of your stuff. I think it was in the Puddle Pod. I saw, what was it? Anyway, we have started to adopt with Slack's new update, trying to make sure that people aren't messaging, you know, outside of, we've got a global team, people in all continents outside of Antarctica, I think. Oh, North America too. But anyway, we've got a team all over. And different time zones. So we're trying to make sure that we're looking after each other and trying to send messages and set boundaries in that regard. And I definitely know what you're talking about with the you know, the sleep and being too wired and passionate about the startup. I'm obviously you know, founder of Athyna, so it's like my baby, you know, more than anyone, obviously. And it's funny. So I've been using a Whoop strap of late, and it's really great because I'm competitive, so I'm gamifying my own wellness. But it's funny because it tells you your sleep, your hours of, you know, actual sleep rather than time in bed and so forth, going off your heart rate, and also it tells you your sleep need. So last night, for example, I slept 6 hours and 35 minutes, but I need tonight to sleep like 8 hours and 40 minutes because on the weekends I catch up with like 9 hours of actual deep sleep, and then Monday I'm feeling good, but I only sleep 6 hours because I'm too wired at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. to get back to sleep. Then the next day it's the same, and the next day. And my recovery on the app, it shows you your recovery going off your heart rate variability. My recovery was like 90% on Monday, and it's 34% now. It's just because, like, you know, 6 hours sleep, and for me it's because I'm like a little kid on Christmas every day when I wake up to check Slack. I'm like, oh my God, what have you been working on? And so I fully get it. So you're a remote first org at Startmate, right?
Yeah.
So how do you continue to have a healthy culture and work-life balance with Like, what things have you put in? Were you always remote first? Let me start with that. Were you always remote first, or?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, gotcha. So, do you have like, what rules do you have around like continuing to build a great work-life boundaries and also culture, considering you are remote?
Yeah, totally. We've got quite a few different initiatives here, and it always is driven by the team and what they actually want. So it's kind of interesting. Like the first thing that we implemented, which works incredibly well and has helped everybody, is that's such a no-brainer, which is complete no Slack weekends. And it's literally a rule where nobody is even allowed to send any Slack messages, whether private or public, in the Slack channel itself. And it just helps, right? Like, even if it is, at first, what I personally missed was because we have a reading channel, and the articles in the reading channel were always amazing. And I posted a lot of articles over the weekend as well. And at first, when we introduced the rule, I actually was sad that all of those articles were gone. But now, actually, like, after having this rule for like 6 to 12 months, it's actually awesome, because you would still jump into the Slack channel just to check the reading one, and maybe somebody put in a work update and suddenly you're caught up in work. But now that whole Slack environment is just empty over the weekend, and it gives you that mental break, which is awesome. The second one, which is a slightly more controversial rule, and this is one which we're having a conversation today, whether we're still upkeeping it or not, is one around no Slack messages before 7 a.m. and no Slack messages after 7 p.m. And we tried that out, actually, to, again, similarly give everybody a bit of a break from Slack. Interestingly enough, I think we're actually going back to allowing all of this again, because, as you said, we are a completely remote-first environment, but also a completely flexible environment. And realistically, or like what I want to lean into, is giving everybody the flexibility to work whenever and however. And the interesting kind of realization we've had is that, especially for parents, it actually is great to take off 3 till 5 p.m. And then jump on again at 8 or 9 p.m. after the child's in bed and Slack on it. And it actually is almost prohibitive in a way, and not great for them if they can't send a Slack message after the time. So that's kind of like an interesting one of actually leaning full on into this flexibility, but then making it very clear, though, that there is no expectation at all for anybody to be working at the time and to be replying to those messages. So it almost is a bit of like a mindset shift and change. So those are just like two small kind of tactical things which we've done. I might just stop there.
Oh yeah, definitely happy for you to keep going. I'm taking notes.
Same.
But the most important thing is actually just to have the conversation with your team, right? How does everybody feel about it? And if you've built that culture that everybody is willing to speak up, that's actually the important part, to make everybody feel comfortable.
Yeah. I think the weekends is for sure the big one. That's super interesting as to what you said about 7 to 7. Because it makes sense. I actually used to, I think I still do, block my apps after, I think it's after 8 and up until 7. Block my apps on my phone, any like work apps or scrolling apps, to keep myself off and just to try and wind down a little bit. But yeah, it does make sense what you say, because one of the benefits of like the new way we work, I mean, a lot of orgs were already remote first pre-COVID, but like, you know, the new world we live in is that full autonomy to do what you want, you know, where you want, when you want. So that's cool. So you're for people listening, I went through a course that Michael ran called the Puddle Pod. It was awesome, around productivity. It was a productivity huddle. So I feel like I like to think of at Athyna, and with myself, always trying to improve in 1, 2, and 3%, because if you're always like slight iterations and improvements across, you know, the board, then it ends up being every year a 10, 20, 25% improvement. And it's like an old sporting call. Like I used to play local footy when I was younger. Aussie rules, and it was always like you have to do the 1%ers, chasing and tackling and all that. It was always the 1%ers, and I really believe in that. You seem to be the productivity master, so and I feel like I don't know you that well, but I know you better of the last 3 months. I feel like you kind of try and squeeze every bit of potential out of yourself. Like, how do you view kind of productivity and being the best, most
Well, actually, let me start with why did they even start Paddle Pod in the first place? So Paddle Pod is productivity huddle pod. And I started it earlier this year, and the whole idea was similar to what I covered all the way at the beginning of this podcast, which was how can I scale myself? So I was giving lots of 1-hour talks and 30-minute upgrade sessions to friends, and they really enjoyed it. But like rather than giving that talk to 10 or 20 people, I genuinely want to pass that on to a whole community of hundreds and thousands of people, which is why I started PaddlePod itself. And maybe the most surprising thing for people in PaddlePod, or maybe is actually how it starts. Because I think everybody always expects and suspects that if I'm going to do an 8-week productivity course, it's going to be straight into tips and tricks and all of those different tools and saving mechanisms and ways to work faster and better and so on. But genuinely, the way I see productivity is making your life easier. It is all about simplification and streamlining, and then building things on top of your existing habits and just doing things because you enjoy them and they're fun for you. So it is so much around habit stacking. It's so much around like getting the base layer of things right for yourself, and then kind of adding on top things on top which actually which you enjoy doing. So maybe as an example, the first exercise we actually go through is literally look at all of your different tools which you use right now and look at a couple of examples of when do you capture your thoughts, how, and we just streamline that into a handful of tools just to really simplify your head in a way. Like it's almost like your head inbox. And the second thing we actually do is, rather than even go into productivity tools themselves, we actually look at social structures of like the most important thing in your life is actually the relationships which you're having. So like your family, your friends, and your colleagues, and how do you go about those in a structured way? And here again, like the importance is actually a structured way. It helps you so much more when you have those catch-ups on a regular basis, and that kind of cadence helps people a lot. And then on top of that, you can essentially put in lots of other structures. So for example, let me give you another example just to finish this off of how do I look at productivity. I do a lot of things. Like I write a weekly update to my whole team of what I'm working on. I write a monthly update to my whole family of how I'm going. I write a weekly update to my best friends of how I'm going. I write an annual update which I put in publicly, etc. And there's probably another like 5 or 10 things which I write which are like similar updates kind of thing. And that kind of seems crazy, but if you go about it in a structured way, it actually makes it makes it a lot easier. Because the way I, for example, do it is it starts with the base layer, which is every single day you do a stand up and a wrap up. And we do that as part of Startmate as well. We literally just say, hey, those are the 3 things I'm going to work on today. And this is how I went. So then every single week, I literally take those daily stand-ups and I write it up to my best friends, being like, hey, this is how my week went. This is actually good, bad, and ugly. And then out of those weekly updates, I can wrap together a monthly update. All I have to do is take those 4 weekly updates and I sort of send an email around to my whole family being like, hey, this is what happened. This is a good, bad, and ugly of my whole month. And then if you think about it for the whole year, that's exactly the same thing. All I have to do now is take those 12 monthly updates, consolidate them into a yearly update, and that's about it. So you actually quite nicely stack social structures and kind of your update structures together. So they actually don't take up much headspace itself, but it kind of naturally fits in together.
What a fascinating system. What I was most surprised with the course was the wellness and I feel like wellness and happiness. It was a lot of, it was, when you think of a productivity course, you don't assume that you're going to sit in and challenge how you relate with all of your closest friends, families, colleagues and so forth. And there was a lot of that. And it made perfect sense, like if you want to be a productive, happy, healthy version of yourself, well, healthy and happy need to come first, probably before productive. So, because the second week or third week, whenever it was, when you do the social structures, how often do you check in with your best friends? What's the cadence that you speak to your family? Who are your next best friends? How are you going to treat those relationships? Not many people would sit down and plan those relationships. But even just going through the exercise, when we got together in the groups, we had small groups in the exercises throughout the course. It was actually quite emotional, because it's all laid bare. All right, cool. I don't really have structures around when I speak to my closest friends, and like we're all busy now. And I know I went and set up a 3-month catch up with my best buddies, like a quarterly, like spring, summer, autumn, so on and so forth, catch up. But yeah, it was really quite a lot of emotional side of productivity, which I was really surprised to see.
Yeah, definitely. That is probably the most surprising thing to people, where productivity comes out of so many different other directions. I mean, the other parts of Paddlepod as well, which kind of go into that space, is even stuff with how do you say no to people, which is an emotional challenge, but it is kind of like leading into a happy life and cutting things back. Or another part of Paddlepod is also how do you manage people? How do you make the kind of psychological safety work? And that is actually a really, really cool part of productivity, because it's like working with people. And it's not just your own productivity, but it's actually your team's productivity as well, which has a massive effect on your own.
100%. So I saw, when you look at obviously your LinkedIn, /career and so on and so forth, it stands out to me. So you've been through obviously the corporate side of things into operations in startups that went super successfully. Now working in a startup that helps ambitious startup founders and so on and so forth. All this stuff. But I didn't ever see the Batko startup. And then going through the Puddle Pod, I noticed that you registered the PTY Ltd, the business the other day. So, I mean, is this what will be your magnum opus?
Potentially, yeah. I was saying that if there was ever a reason why I would leave Startmate, and I love Startmate, it would be for Paddlepod. But yeah, I mean, the vision for Paddlepod itself is actually threefold. There's a three-step plan in place. The first one is to bring a community together to work in cohorts of 8 weeks. And now we've got the latest cohort is 70 people large with cohort number 3. And that's actually really, really fun. But then again, you can only really run like 4 or 5 cohorts a year, and it can only roughly be at 100 people big. And the scale is kind of limited, but the community itself is actually incredible, because they actually keep building content for Paddlepod as well. Step number 2, though, is because it is that kind of base layer of productivity, is to bring that into every startup and company around the world. So the crazy thing to me is that all of the technology and all of those software products are actually getting really, really good. Like, right, Trello is awesome, Jira is epic, Asana is getting better, like Webflow, Notion, etc. Like all of those tools themselves have actually so much functionality, and you can be really good at them. But what people lack is actually the base system in their life, which is like, how do you work with all of those tools together and do that well? Like, how do you organize your own life? But then even more basic of like, how do you set up your MacBook just to work well for yourself? Like nobody actually teaches you that. No. Like, it's crazy. So what I am doing right now is building that version for a whole company and a whole startup of like 10, 50, 100 people to go through a version where they can go through that as a company to set themselves up well for business. And then step number 3 is an onboarding journey for every single person that starts in the company. You should have a 5-day kind of onboarding for how to set up your productivity, your systems to work optimally. And then that vision is essentially the one of, well, every single person should at least be working with the systems fully set up.
Yeah. Not surprising. As soon as I finished the course, I was like, I want to get my whole team to do this. This is sick. I actually thought of Walo. I thought of you, Walo, in terms of like how you do things and like how you love working on Notion and so forth. And I reckon, we'll throw a few of our team in there at some point for sure.
Doc thinks of me. So cool.
Cool. You go, Walo. Sorry.
I actually had a question for you, but I don't want it to. I hope it's not like a gigantic one. It's like, usually talking about emotions, being in a good psychological state makes you. I always say this, like, if I'm not feeling good, I can't do good work. I always make sure that I keep myself like in a very good state so that I can do my best work. So in the event that things outside your control, maybe, for example, I don't know, maybe worst case scenario, let's say your roof falls down on your head or something. How do you keep yourself productive? Because I looked at my ceiling and I was like, oh yeah, this could fall down. So how do you recover from that or maintain your productivity in those environments?
Yeah, I'll tell you. Okay, this is a great question. I mean, funny enough, just 2 months ago, we had one of our team members had the roof fall on their head in their house in Western Australia. There's a really good quote by James Clear, which is you don't rise to the level of your goals, but you fall to the level of your systems. And I probably butchered that quote a little bit, but the whole idea is that you can set yourself so many goals as you want, but when things get tough, you always will fall back to your base layer operating system, whatever that is. And if you have that system in place where, for example, you've got a morning routine, and the morning routine is every single day, I get up at 6:30, I go for a 5-kilometer run, I meditate for 10 minutes, like whatever that is. To be honest, it doesn't have to be as sophisticated, but you have something that you do over and over again. That is your base system. And even when things get incredibly tough, you actually always fall back onto that system. So it is very much around creating those habits for yourself that when things get tough, you actually don't even think about it and you do that anyway. So for example, staying healthy is a great one. If it is just in your system that you go for a run every single day, even when things get really tough, you will still go for a run. It's just your way of coping mechanism. If you don't have that in your system and you only go for a run like every day, like once a week or twice a week and sporadically kind of thing, when things get tough, like running is the last thing on your mind, and you're probably not going to run or stay healthy for like a couple of months. Yeah. So it's so my tip here essentially is like, create those habits for yourself where you do them without even thinking and very consciously designing that.
So preparing for a rainy day, I guess. Yeah. Or a roof falling day. Yeah. Thanks. Thanks. That was really insightful. I have like 3 other easy questions for you as a ritual for our podcast.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're up for it.
Sure.
Yeah, great. Okay, number 1. Can you tell us, your listeners, a book that has changed the way you think lately, or one that has changed the way you see your whole life, like all-time favorites, I guess?
My all-time favorite is a book called Courage to be Disliked. And it is an incredible book by a philosopher and written in a slightly different style. But the whole idea is essentially that don't live the life of what other people expect you to be living, but actually just live up to your full potential and just do things the way you'd like to do them.
That's beautiful. I love that. Yeah. My next question is, what is a business or life tool that you can't live without? Something that supports you every day.
All right. Cool. I'm just trying to think. Just looking at my phone right there. The one which comes to mind is.
If you're having a hard time.
No.
I can tell you the last guest
Yeah.
Said breakfast.
Okay.
World's oldest technology.
I'm going to go with a slightly different one actually. So live tool or like rhythm, which I have, which I mean I can live without it, but to be honest, I would not like to. Which is it's an article I wrote as well, and it's actually originally by Nick Crocker, partner at Blackbird, which is called Elephants, and it's the whole rhythm or system or tool, which is essentially get your best friends into the same room, virtual room, and keep each other up to date every single week, and then help yourself set goals every single month or quarter or year, and keep checking in on them. On the one side, it's awesome accountability. On the other side, it's awesome kind of stretch goals and pushing each other, and finally also just supporting each other. So that's something I do every single week, and it's awesome to. My friends live all around the world. Like one of them is in Switzerland, one of them in Austria, but it's so great to be hearing from them every single week.
I think I'm going to be doing this. Thank you very much. Yeah. My final question is an easy one. What would you say, like, what's your number one advice, I guess, to entrepreneurs in young startups? You know, what would you give them? It could be about wellness, could be about hustling, could be about people, anything, really.
Oh no, the broader the question, the harder it actually gets to answer. Number one advice is okay, so maybe a slightly different one, which would be it's all about execution. Like people have a billion ideas and the idea itself is worth nothing. It's all about execution. If you have an idea and you think you can do something, just give it a try. It has never been easier to give a startup a try, to actually build something, to start a business. And you don't even need to start a business. There's so many no-code, low-code tools where everybody can just jump in and learn them themselves. And there's literally been never an easier time to just start validating whether something exists or not. So like always focus on the customer and just try to sign somebody up.
Oh, thanks. Reassuring stuff. I'll throw it back to Doc to, I guess,
wrap it up. I think that's pretty much us, I think. So, mate, always a pleasure. You're an exceptional operator, super well respected, and I know a lot of people around Melbourne, Australia, and worldwide startup community will get heaps out of this. So before we shoot off though, where can people find more about yourself, about Startmate, about PuddlePod, and so forth? Where would people go to find more about you?
I'm quite LinkedIn and Twitter active, so jump on there. Batko Michael. Startmate.com is the Startmate website, and lots and lots of different programs there for if you are thinking about starting a startup or joining a startup or investing in a startup. And lastly, if you are interested in productivity, puddlepod.com, productivityhuddlepod.com, and sign up there as well.
Epic. All right. Well, as I said, great stuff. Super valuable insights from the man himself, BatkoOS. That's it from us, and thanks for coming on the show.
See ya.
Cool.
Thank you.